Hi, greetings everybody. Welcome to Survive and Thrive in the age of AI. I am your co-host, Dr. Steve Haberlin. I'm here with my collaborator and friend, Dr. Shiva Jahani. Shiva, do you want to say hi to the
Hi,
audience?
everyone. Nice to meet you, Lama, and thank you for joining us. We are honored to have you here. Thank you.
Yeah, our special guest is Lama Rod Owens, and we're excited. We've been working for quite a while to get you on and to talk with you and have this conversation around AI, but also contemplative practices and your background in Buddhism. So your bio is Lama Rod Owens is a Black Buddhist Southern Queen, an international influencer with a Master of Divinity degree in Buddhist Studies from Harvard Divinity School, a focus on intersection of social change, identity, and spiritual practice. He's got some books. He's the author of The New Saints, From Broken Hearts to Spiritual Warriors, Love and Rage, The Path of Liberation Through Anger, and also a co-author of Radical Dharma, Talking Race, Love, and Liberation. His teaching centers on freedom, self-expression, and radical self-care. That's actually how I came to know you, Lama, was through, I was Love and Rage. I read
Yeah.
that book, and like when you kind of center things around contemplative practice around anger and rage,
Yeah.
it was different, right? I was like, well,
Yeah.
that's different. I haven't really heard that conversation before, so I ended up, I think, reading that book, and I really enjoyed it. So
Yeah.
welcome.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So your background is very unique. I mean, really interesting background. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey? Like, how did you even get to become a lama and write books and do what you do?
I don't know. It feels like one mistake after the other got me here. I'm originally from here in Georgia. I'm currently in Atlanta,
Okay.
and I'm from Northwest Georgia, Rome, Georgia. And
Interesting.
and all this land is, traditionally like Cherokee, Muskogee land. I grew up really closely to the history of indigenous people, the history of my kind of ancestors, my enslaved ancestors. And growing up here and spending, up until my 20s, I just felt like I needed to get out of here. So I finished college here, went to the Northeast, to Boston, and really just delved into one of my primary passions, which is justice, activism, and organizing. And after a while, I hit a wall. Right? And it was an emotional wall. It was a breakdown. It was an emotional breakdown, right? Everything was so overwhelming, and I didn't feel like I had the tools to deal with just everything, the anger, the depression, the disappointment, everything. And I was really fortunate as well to be surrounded by meditators, by Buddhists in particular, but meditators in general. And their propaganda, started kind of rubbing off on me, and I began a meditation practice. This was the early 2000s. And before you knew it, right, I knew that Buddhism was where I needed to be, right, and where I needed to study. And I think Buddhism for me answered all the questions that I had about who I was and what I was and my purpose and the meaning of life and all those existential questions, right, that comes up in your early 20s. And it gave me a grounding. And the grounding was to pay attention to my mind, right? It's to get clear about why I was doing what I was doing and to start practicing a lot of agency. But all that was really pointed to suffering. Like it was like, I am suffering and I need to end that. I need to do something different. And that really opened up the path. And before I knew it, I had chosen my tradition, which was Tibetan Buddhism. And Tibetan Buddhism, among all the traditions of Buddhism, felt very evocative, felt very risky, it felt very dynamic, and it engaged me. And the first thing that I was challenged to work on was anger. But the integration of anger, contemplative practice with social justice. And that's always been where I've lived, right? The intersection of contemplative practice, identity, and activism. And then before you knew it, I was at the monastery. I entered into a 3-year retreat in 2008. And in In Tibetan traditions, right, to become a teacher or a lama, you enter into a 3-year retreat, which is the primary way that we're authorized. There are other ways to become a lama, but I went through the traditional 3-year retreat program, and it transformed my life, right? It gave me the tools that I needed to continue to move forward. And so after I completed 3-year retreat, I was out in the world teaching, and very soon I was being led back to school, to graduate school at Harvard Divinity School, which was such a blessing to be able to ground my experiential practice in scholarship and study. And since then, right, I've just been in the world really trying to move forward with integrating, a real concern for justice and equity with a really deep and engaged spiritual practice.
That's a fascinating journey. I have some parallels I got to ask you about. So, in my early 20s, that's when I learned meditation because
Yeah.
I was overwhelmed, and
Yeah.
I didn't articulate it the way you said, like, but I guess I didn't have the tools, or I didn't have a method, or I didn't have a way that was a healthy coping mechanism or something. So that's why I learned transcendental meditation in my early
Mhm.
20s, a Vedic tradition. But I was going to ask you, so you were in Boston at the time you learned. It was early, maybe 2000s. What was the meditation community like? Was it like a meditation group you joined, or how did you connect with other meditators?
Well, I lived in an intentional community called Haley House, and it was a community that was rooted in the Catholic worker tradition. And the Catholic workers began during the Depression in New York, and it was like literally a community of radical Catholics, you know, doing activism work, right, and living together, right, in intentional community. And so Haley House, which was in Boston, was influenced, right, by the Catholic worker movement. But everyone in that community, no one was really Catholic. Everyone was Buddhist. And most of the people studied back then with Lama Surya Das, right, who was a American Tibetan Buddhist teacher in the Dzogchen tradition, or the Nyingma tradition of Tibetan Buddhism. So I started with his community, right? I didn't explore other communities. I think a lot of practitioners like go out and they try different things, but I was literally, when I became interested in meditation, everything was right in front of me. The teachers, the practitioners, the books, the opportunities, right? And in many ways, Tibetan Buddhism chose me,
It just
right, in that
clicked.
moment. It just clicked. Like I had no need to explore Zen meditation or mindfulness or insight or anything else. I was like, this is where I'm at. And I say that because for me, mythology is really important, right? Storytelling is really important. Mystical realism is so
Exactly.
important for me. All of that really tied back into my ancestry and culture here in the South. Right. And Tibetan Buddhism eventually gave me permission to return back to my ancestral practices as well, which is more contemporary, currently when I'm exploring.
What is your contemplative practice like? What's your daily practice look like, Lama, today? Meditation every day, or can you talk us through? I'm just curious, what do you do every day for your
You,
contemplative?
you know what? Every day is different, right? I have a basic awareness practice that I do. I call it SNOL, which I talk about in Love and Rage and the New Saints. So I'm always working through that. And I think people think, oh, like every day is full of ritual and ceremony. No, it's very simple. So I get up and um, one of the first things that I do is that I tend to the altars in my home. I have ancestral altars, deity altars. I make offerings, I make prayers, and so forth. Right? I always want to start the day like that. And then after that, you may go into just a period of a very simple contemplative practice, a snow practice perhaps. And then the rest of the day, I'm just listening and feeling into what else needs to be done. And that includes ritual and ceremony work as well. Sometimes that means prayer, that means working outside with nature. Sometimes that's asana and yoga. Sometimes it's breath practice. Sometimes, if I'm working with a particular experience like grief, right? I may do some grief work as well. So a lot of my practice is informed by the moment.
Ah, that's different. It's very fluid. It's very
Yes.
responsive to. Oh, that's different. I didn't expect that.
Well,
But
that's important for
yeah,
me.
Yeah.
Like I think practitioners get into habits of just doing the same thing over and over again, and it turns into autopilot. And then
Yeah.
after that, you're not practicing, you're just going through the motions. And I went through a period, this was 2014. I went through a period where I had to completely reinvent my practice because I realized that I just wasn't connected to my practice. And so I made a commitment to be much more fluid and responsive after that. Instead of just saying, oh, I need to do this every day to be a good practitioner,
hmm
I let that go and my practice really deepened after that.
Shiva,
Fascinating.
yeah,
Yeah.
anything that you want to add or ask?
It's so, it's very fascinating to me because I'm teaching yoga and I have been teaching for, years, and my students have been talking the same, as you said about the different type of practice like breath work, and yoga asanas and other types. And that interestingly is all, everyone when talk about how we can just practice different tools and techniques, and see in the moment
Yes.
what we just this moment call me for that. It's not like every morning we have to just do this
Yep.
and do this. No, you just
Yes.
listen, go with the flow, and just see what do you feel and how you just in this moment this practice will help you to be a better version of yourself. That I really love that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And other thing that helps my practice is to be in relationship with people practicing all kinds of modalities.
Exactly, yeah.
Right. And I learned so much from people, what people do.
Yeah.
I want to be in, yeah, there are many. Yeah. You
Yeah.
know, I
There are
just,
many
I,
tools and techniques.
yeah. Yeah. And I would say, lastly, I just want to be in conversation with things as they arise. And that
Exactly.
means that I have to be really like spontaneous, to be flexible, right? I go where my practice is calling me, not just stay still somewhere and say, this is what I do. I don't grow like that as a practitioner.
Well, Lama, we know responding to the moment and change is big right now. We're in a major. I think it's safe to say we're in a major societal
Yeah.
shift,
Yeah.
major economic shifts with the age of AI and artificial intelligence just saturating, whether people like it or not, saturating every aspect of their life. And we're curious what your general take is on AI. Is it Do you use it? Do you have concerns? What goes through your
Well,
head when you hear AI?
well, it's exactly what you've mentioned. Like it's integrated into everything. So I can't not use it, right? Everything is using AI now, right? Without my consent, I would say, in many ways. So it's like, okay, it's here now. I have to really engage with it. And I think, for me, I want to be really cautious with my relationship to AI. I think my biggest kind of feeling here is that we run the risk of AI beginning to think for us, right? And when I tie this back into my training and back into Buddhism, what I understand is that nothing can do the work of liberation on our behalf, right? The Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree 2,500 years ago, and had to work through his own perceptions, his own misunderstanding, right? That's individual work, right? And I think that we can get a little misled around AI, right? That AI is going to like solve all of our problems, right? There are problems that AI can definitely solve, but it won't solve the problem of how I relate to myself and understand myself, right? That's where I'm really struggling at right now with AI, you know?
Yeah, I was going to say, is that the or is there a Tibetan Buddhist view on AI? Have the leaders
Hmm.
come out with something, or can you help us kind of
Yeah.
understand how the Tibetan Buddhist tradition looks at AI?
Yeah. It's really interesting. I started a 3-year retreat in 2008. In 2008, I had heard of an iPhone, but no one had an iPhone or any smartphone. It was like very wealthy. It was like having a BlackBerry, you know. And then when I get out of 3-year retreat, which was middle of 2011, right, I leave retreat, which is a big ceremony, and you go back out into a crowd of people waiting for you who haven't seen you in over 3 years, and everyone has a phone. They're carrying their phone, they're hunched over their phone, right? And my friends are like, look at what we have now, right? And I was so overwhelmed at how quickly the culture shifted to smartphone culture, right? And I remember my teachers, my teacher back then being a Tibetan, the same generation of the Dalai Lama, was saying this kind of technology creates another reality that we'll have to break out of. And I have held that so closely with me over all these years that indeed technologies, and particularly AI, it creates another layer of reality, right? That makes it hard for us to find a tethering or rootedness in just the present moment,
What
right?
would be the first layer of reality in the Buddhist view, for just for people listening, would be your own delusions, your own greed, your own anger, these kind of.
Yeah, it's the misunderstanding of self. It's like the illusion that there's a self existing autonomous self. So that's the first illusion, right? And then this self gives rise to a reality that we call samsara, right? Samsara is individual and collective,
Yeah.
right? And samsara literally means cycle or will, right? But I often think of samsara as just this expression of delusion. Like I am living a dream and I think it's super real. And I'm just reacting to the realness of everything. And that intensifies a suffering. But that suffering is really the feeling of being very distant from the real truth, the ultimate truth of things,
And
right?
then you have now this technological
Then it
way
complicates it.
of
Yeah,
reality now that just muddles, right? Just really,
yeah.
okay.
And I think, I mean, I know you've heard this before and worked with this before. I say this all the time, but I think the Matrix is a really good, you know, kind of like media for me that's helped me to shape my understanding of samsara and the phenomenal world, right? This is a program that I'm trying to cut through to get back to the truth, right? And AI, which is what Matrix is based on, is AI, but AI creates another layer, right, of a reality, right, that we can get wrapped up in. So AI can take us out of even this basic samsara into another samsara, right? Which is why I really love the Matrix, because you get out of the Matrix, you get back to the real world, you're still in a whole bunch of struggle. Like you're still a
Yeah.
human living underground.
Yeah.
So and this is why, and that creates another dilemma, really illustrates another dilemma, is that why would you leave the Matrix if you knew that you're going to be ending up in an even harsher reality? Right. So why would we try to give up AI, which is moving very quickly ahead with really establishing realities that are just really based on pleasure, comfort? Like, why would we want to eventually resist that to come back to this experience of being with our discomfort? Right.
I
And
So
it's
wonder,
Lama,
seductive.
go
yeah.
ahead.
Yeah, you mentioned about the first started with like who you are, meditation will help us with who we are and, our goals and the purpose of life. And so that's what, our core values and the core of, how we can approach life. So with age of AI, what do you think about those, I heard you say, you always are on your own, space, and you know who you are. But as you say, we go to the different layers of like AI layers and still come back. What do you think about like this interaction with your, this who you are and goals and your purpose of life? Is it could be changes or not? You just, what do you think about this
Yeah,
interaction?
yeah, the interaction, I know sometimes I come off as very negative, but like there is a positive interaction. But Shiva, as you mentioned, like and alluded to, right, we have to have a clear sense of who we are. Like I have to have a very, very rooted sense of who I am, my motivations, all of my hidden truths and realities. And the more I'm aware of that, the more I can be in relationship to AI in a way that I don't feel as if I'm being lured away from myself into the pleasure or the comfort of AI. But so I
I
can I
feel
can
like
go back and forth,
Yeah,
right?
because I feel like my student is feeling like this scared of like using AI and and forgiving, and then they I keep that and they can't give it back, and
Yeah.
this is kind of
Yeah.
the interaction you're
Yeah.
thinking about, scared you of, of this interaction. What do you think? What would you advise for undergraduate students that, have that anxiety and fear
Yeah.
about interaction?
AI anxiety, right? Even in the literature,
Yeah.
we've studied it.
And I can't imagine students right now having access to this level of technology. And I know I've been following, some of the discourse around using chat with GPT to write papers. Like that's really intense pressure, right? And for students, I would say, what, we have to start setting some boundaries around our relationship, our usage of AI. Right. And I think critical thinking is where we start to draw the line. Like I can't let AI do my work for me, even with some of the less intensive programs like, Microsoft Word now includes AI where you can clean up language and write paragraphs. And I have found myself saying, actually, no, like I need to write and express myself, right? And stay in relationship to my own process, right? Because I have to stay rooted in my own critical thinking process, or I get lulled into this false sense of security and stability,
Yeah, I
right?
think this is, yeah, I think Lama is so interesting that you said that, because you mentioned about how you know yourself,
Mhm.
how you also with movement choose different types of practices. This is all about awareness and, how your own awareness and also environmental awareness help you to interact with AI in different levels of back to who you are, and not let that take over of your own, practices and everything. What
Yeah.
do you think about meditation will help them with this, critical thinking, and how they can just help themselves to be more aware of using and interacting with AI?
Yeah. I would say, well, I would go back and say, you know what? I came into Buddhism because of how it led with suffering, right? And that I know that turns people off, but Buddhism got me because it didn't gaslight me about the fact that I was not having a good time in life. And Buddhism said, of course you're not, right? Because there's suffering here. But that suffering doesn't have to be the one overwhelming experience. There are other experiences. You just need some space, right? And what I take from that early experience into this conversation is how I have learned over all these years to be much more at home with my discomfort,
Mhm.
not to bypass it, not to get over it. And I think this is what makes AI so challenging, particularly for young people, is that maybe a lot of young folks aren't getting the tools that they need to actually be in relationship with real discomfort. But that's not just a young person problem, that's a human problem, right? We're always trying to avoid suffering and discomfort, right? And for me, my life was saved because I got the tools to be able just to sit here and to feel and to experience like my discomfort, but not to be lost or overwhelmed by it. Like I don't need a program. I don't need technology to just to sit here and to feel what I'm feeling and to relax and to open. And so I want to see not just young people, but all of us equipped with more of these tools, right? This is why meditation is so important. I'm happy mindfulness, right, is such a phenomenon, but I think it's going to be challenged, with the emergence of
We, Lama, so we did we have a research paper that's under review now, where I think it was about ended up being about 120 undergrads, and we found a relationship where there seems to be a relationship where when the mindfulness increases or they do more mindfulness practice, the AI anxiety is reduced. So
Yeah.
see, and this is not the only paper. There was a larger study done out of China where they found a similar thing with undergrads, where it seems to be like it helps you as a to kind of mediate the relationship somehow, or still understand it. But do you think like mindfulness tools, if they practice, I don't know, a young person practices mindfulness meditation or some mindfulness technique, do you think that might be a tool?
absolutely. Right. As we know that like we're not escaping AI. So what are the tools that helps us to manage the pressures and the anxieties of AI? And I think mindfulness is really important. That's been the case in my life, right? I can be in relationship to AI, but I don't feel as if I'm being distracted from myself, right? I'm still in my body, right? I'm still moving through the things that I have to move through. And AI, yes, on the one hand, is really quite wonderful, right? But I don't have to escape into AI if I'm having a bad day or a challenge. Like I have a practice, right? A rooted practice to meet my interpersonal challenges.
Can I ask you about with suffering and the Buddhist view? This might be it might be an oversimplification, but my understanding is suffering can be caused because you're not going with the change.
Yeah,
Life is always
exactly.
changing, and life is not transparent, but life is fleeting,
Yeah,
right? Each moment is you lose each moment. Like right now, we're into the next moment and next moment. So
exactly.
would it be safe to say if a person is not adjusting or trying to change, I guess, in a healthy way with AI, with this new society and this sci-fi kind of society that's happening, would that result in more suffering, or is that a too simplified way of saying it in your?
Yes, right. Yes, we have a really intense attachment to permanence, to things not changing. And being with change takes a lot of energy. That means that we are constantly having to rethink who we are and who others are. We're constantly having to deal with the disappointment, right? But we're also having to constantly be aware of all the ways that we're trying to escape the discomfort of this moment, right? And leaning into this future, yes, like I think that part of the work is learning to embrace the reality of this moment and where this moment is pointing us towards. And at the same time, understanding what we need to do in order to stay much more at home in our own experience instead of leaving our experience to create an artificial experience that
So
has less suffering.
it's like a balance of going with the change, but not so much that you get like lost in this another technological kind of illusion, right? This
Exactly.
illusion. So it's like surfing. We're surfing a wave, but not getting like allowing the wave to kind of
Yeah.
overcome us, right? Or to go
Yeah.
kind of start to dip in the water. We have to. It seems like we have to be very skilled though to pull that
Well,
off.
that's the
Like
training, the
yeah, the train.
skillfulness, right? I think what Buddhism is also teaching us is that yes, like we're in this reality and you can play the game without being distracted or tricked by the game. Right. So yeah, I mean, I'm here, I'm sitting, we're sitting in the world, we're in culture, society, all of this, right? And I can engage with everything, right? I'm an adult, like I have to pay bills, I have to deal with all kinds of issues, family, health, everything, right? And I also have to have the space to understand that this is just one experience of a reality, but it's not the ultimate reality that I'm trying to break into or to awaken to. Right.
That
So I
back to your
know, yeah, I know this is an illusion. And at the same time, I'm engaging with it. And that's the balance that we're trying to enact. And this is how I'm trying to be with AI right now. This is an illusion, but I need to stay very aware not to get sucked into this illusion and start believing that it's real, ultimately real, because it's just another layer of a reality, right, that I have to cut through to get back to this ultimate truth.
Kind of like
I
playing,
think
you're playing in a play, and you just have to remember you're an actor, right?
Exactly.
Like you're enjoying it and you're fully engaged as the actor on
Yeah.
stage, but you don't actually start thinking you're that character. You,
Yeah.
you don't lose yourself in the acting. I'm sorry, Shiva. Go.
no, I was thinking about, as I was listening about the how meditation and always checking and asking yourself, what is my purpose,
Yes.
ultimate goal,
Yeah.
that always help you to know, what to do. It's a navigation, it's just navigate, just go and interact, but back again to, to your own identity, and
Yeah.
also, meditate with purpose of life, and also, change everything, as you're saying, with being mindful to your practice.
Yeah. Absolutely. Right. And like I often say too, that being in the world is like being a drag queen. It's like putting on drag. A drag queen doesn't get lost in the illusion of drag. And that's the mastery of drag. It's like I am taking on a persona, but that's ultimately not fully who I am, but it's a performance,
Formative, yeah, yeah.
you know? And that's what we're trying to get to, right? And on top of that, we want to to be connected to our lives. Well, we want to choose ourselves as much as possible, to choose our experiences, to choose to be with our bodies, to be in the moment as much as possible, right? And the best way to do that is through compassion. And compassion is really about telling the truth about discomfort and learning how to tend to that discomfort. I work with a lot of young people as well, and there's a lot of hopelessness, on top of AI anxiety. And I ask young people, okay, what do you care about? Like, what are you passionate about? For me, compassion is what keeps bringing me back to my body, to this moment. Compassion, for me, in terms of an ethic, is really my commitment to helping all beings to suffer less. As a teacher, right, that's the primary ethic. I am here to help people to suffer less, right? I can't do that if I am not tending to my own suffering, right?
And I think it
Oh, go
is
ahead.
helping, I think it's important to experience that.
Yeah.
And then, you have that feeling of compassionate.
Yes.
That's what, yeah, people cannot feel other people's pain or any other suffering except they have been experiencing in some extent. Not exactly there, but they help them to be compassionate. And I think in terms of back to the AI, I think it's good to interact. It's a really good skills and thing to interact and engage, and all understand that all things happening on us, anxiety, for some people are say pleasure, comfort, discomfort. But in the end, I think meditation and being mindful, and also back to purpose of life and everything, and being compassionate will help us to use it in a good way, and and healthy way of interaction, and also help us to be a better, person, a version of ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Right.
Lama, so somebody, we have a young person listening, or even
Mhm.
even faculty out there, anyone feeling a lot of anxiety about the change that's happening, and the demands of today in
Yeah.
society, what would, and you say you work with young
Mm-hmm.
people, what would be
Mm-hmm.
like one practice or one basic level method or practice that you could kind of walk us through that they could do for anxiety or maybe just feeling a flood of emotions or
Yeah, there would be two things. Like, first, some practical advice would be to become really clear about what you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing. Or my language is often around work. It's like, what is my work? And whose work am I doing that I shouldn't be doing? I think a lot of us are being kind of thrust into a lot of overproductivity, and that's capitalism. We're doing a lot, we're producing a lot, and it's not in favor of our own well-being and health, physically, spiritually, and mentally. Is not promoting that any health. And I would just tell young people, listen, like, you don't have to do everything. You don't have to go to the best schools. You don't have to get the best jobs. You don't have to continue trying to accumulate everything that earlier generations accumulated. Like, what do you want? What makes you happy? And I would say ultimately, well, there are many things, but I would say belonging, community, connectivity, relationships are really important. Stay connected, to communities. Right. So that's the practical advice that I would give first and foremost. And then in terms of practice, right, for me, like, we can talk about meditation, right? We can talk about becoming more aware of your experiences, but I also really think that we need to be out in nature much more. Like, I know that feels almost
yeah,
cliche.
I'm a big fan of that. Yeah.
Yeah, like, I just like,
Hear
we
you
need to,
yeah.
like, the natural world is so simple, right? And I love to just, I hike, I go into the forest, I go to mountains, I go to water. And that, every time I do that, it brings me back, right, to myself, to my body. It simplifies things, right? It brings me back to my humanity. Like, I'm a person in the world, right? And things don't have to be so complicated. Right. And I think that we're in the collective moment of systemic collapse right now because everything has gotten real complicated. Like, we've created systems and institutions that actually have taken us further and further away from our basic humanity. And now we're being asked to return back to that basic humanity, which is about love, which is about care, which is about connecting, it's about empathy, compassion, right? And we have to do this hard work to remember something really basic about who we are as humans. And that feels painful, right? And it's painful because, again, we haven't done the work of tending to or metabolizing all this deep discomfort. And this is why AI becomes really challenging because it distracts us from this interpersonal work that needs to be done. And the further you get away from that work or that discomfort, the more you start believing, oh, there's no work here. You can find yourself in a very, I would say, use the word deluded state where it's like, I'm perfect. I don't need anything. Actually, what's really happening is that you've bypassed the work and you've created this particular reality that's really rooted in comfort. So nature, meditation, of course, right? Connectivity, community. And lastly, I would say, I think it's important that we build relationships with folks where we can be our full emotional selves. That I want to be in relationship with people whom I can grieve with, right? People that I can experience anger with, right? And that takes maturity on both sides, our side and the
Yeah.
side of others, to create these spaces. And I think so many of us are lonely, right? Because we don't feel as if we can really embody our full emotional selves with the people that we're around. There's a lot of fear around emotionality.
That's fascinating. I love the advice, and it's common, and those are things that everybody could do. I
Yeah.
mean, you can learn meditation, but if somebody doesn't want to, it's like you could find a community of like-minded, some interest or hobby, and join the community or the church or whatever it is, and then the nature, even if it's just getting to the park or something, everybody can hopefully get free access, maybe have a state park next to them or a national park. But right, Shiva, we're huge on the outdoors. Both of us, when we're not working, it's like, where are you? I'm on the mountain. She just went to Iceland, was showing me pictures.
Oh,
Like, we're big,
nice.
and not everybody has to do
Yes,
that, right? And,
Yeah,
just walk along the
it
ocean,
was
just walk along the ocean if you can, or a lake, sit by
exactly.
a lake, and it's
I just
exactly what
posted to my
brings
student
you back. Yeah, it
about
brings you back
Iceland.
to yourself, your
Yeah,
basics,
Hmm.
exactly. I was just advising them walking meditation. You just
Yes.
go to
nature.
the
Yeah,
nature. Nature never fail you. You
So
mhm,
just
simple.
walk,
yeah,
listen, yeah, and just let it,
Yeah,
help you to find yourself, because that's what, you only listen to the sound of the nature, birds, and do nothing.
you
And
know,
this is the more efficient way to be productive, because we always learn we have to do to be productive, as you said, Lama. But
yeah,
no, really, that's a wrong message of society. For being more efficient and productive, you should also have time for yourself and
exactly.
yeah, but
let's find your
Shiva,
peace.
there's even a lot of science. They in Japanese call it forest bathing, and they've
Oh, yeah.
studied. There's a lot of empirical benefits, and there was just something came out with children playing in the mud or touching dirt and mud,
Yeah,
and right, and it relieves stress and anxiety. We're just built. It's just naturally, in nature, we're just designed to reap those benefits. You just have to spend time. You don't have to really. It doesn't really matter what you do in nature. You just have to be in it, immerse in it, and you get those. And we're not just talking woohoo. There's scientific benefits
mm,
behind the
exactly.
scientifically proven benefits. So yeah, great advice. So I really enjoy it, Lama, just having you on and just having this
Sure.
different view or perspective of how to deal with. Yeah, I think you nailed it. It's very complicated systems and ways of living nowadays, where people are very stressed and unhappy and trying to figure out like what's coming next. And you can't blame them because we're moving so fast. But
Exactly.
uh, yeah, so thanks so much. And
Thank you
what's
so
next? Maybe
much.
we'll leave with Shiva. Maybe we leave with this. What's the next project? What are you working on? Like, what's the next thing? Maybe that we talk about productivity, but what's the next?
Yes.
We don't want to be we don't want to be too productive. But what's the next contribution?
Yeah.
Another book?
And yeah, yeah, I'm working on a couple of things. I am working on kind of a book project, but it's a collaboration with a good artist friend of mine. So I'm really happy about that. You're talking about really play, and this is an experience of play for me in this next project. And beyond that, anyone can visit me on my website. I have all of my programs. I have in-person programs and mostly online programs that you can just drop into. Some of them you have to sign up for. Some of them require a little bit of a registration fee, but I have a wide range of ritual practices, ceremony practices, meditation practices, as well. And if people want to sit with me in person, I offer programs in multiple countries and around the country now.
All right, we'll put the website in
Yes.
the notes too, so people
Yeah.
can look that up.
I definitely would suggest to my student to go to your website
Yeah,
and read your books
yeah,
Yeah.
and everything.
yeah. She
And I
has
Yeah.
have
a
lots
lot
of
of students.
resources
She has
online,
a tons of.
on YouTube.
She's
Yeah.
getting more and more students. She has hundreds of them now. Like
Good.
the
Well, that's
guru.
where young people are. Like, you
She's
have
like
to
the
go.
yoga. She's become the yoga guru at the university.
I love that. That's the language.
Yeah,
Social media is the language of the younger
yeah,
generations, right?
Yeah.
And that's where we have to be.
yeah. So thanks so much. Thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you and namaste. Thank you.
Namaste.